In Sham Shui Po, there is a street that no one likes to walk alone after midnight. It's not because of danger or crime or the restless noise of the city that never sleeps. It's because of a single, narrow house, number 44, where a pale light still flickers through the cracks of its sealed windows, even when the entire block goes dark. Old people say it used to be a boarding house back in the 1970s, when factory workers filled every alley and neon signs hung like burning moons over the damp streets. They say the house was already cursed then. The owner, a quiet woman with gray eyes, had vanished without a trace one summer night. Her tenants left one by one. And when the police finally broke down the door, they found nothing. No body, no furniture. Only the faint hum of a single fluorescent bulb swaying from the ceiling, refusing to die. No one dared to touch it, and so it burned, year after year, even through storms, even through power cuts. Sometimes the neighbors swore they saw a shadow moving behind that window, a figure that looked too still to be alive. Others claimed they could hear soft knocks in the walls whenever the light blinked. The story spread like the pulse of something buried but not gone. People moved away, new generations forgot, but the house remained, empty, locked, yet somehow breathing. There's a saying in Cantonese, passed quietly among electricians and workers in Sham Shui Po: never fix a light that refuses to die. Because light, they say, is only alive when something feeds it, and not everything that feeds it comes from this world. On a damp February morning, decades later, a government letter arrived at a small electrical maintenance office in Kowloon. The order was simple: inspect the wiring of the abandoned property at number 44 Pei Ho Street. A new urban redevelopment plan required the block to be cleared. The letter was stamped with red ink. Urgent. No one wanted the job. Until one man said yes. His name was Lao Ming, an electrical engineer, 38 years old, quiet, methodical, divorced. He was known for taking work others avoided: old circuits, half-collapsed buildings, anything that made people uneasy. Maybe because he liked the silence. Maybe because he didn't believe in ghosts. When he arrived at Sham Shui Po that afternoon, the district was wrapped in a thin mist. Old men played mahjong under the eaves, the tiles clicking like teeth. The smell of soy and damp concrete filled the air. And there, squeezed between two new glass buildings, stood the house, number 44. It was smaller than he imagined. 3 floors, gray walls veined with cracks, the old wooden doors sealed with rusted chains. Yet behind one window on the top floor, he saw it, that faint blue light, steady, cold, like an eye that had forgotten how to close. Lao Ming frowned. According to the report, the house had been disconnected from the power grid since 1998. No cables, no current, no reason for any light to exist. He stepped closer. The closer he moved, the quieter the street seemed to become, as if the sound itself was being drawn away from him, pulled into that one window. He took out his flashlight, tested it, then pushed open the door. The smell hit him first: stale air, old plaster, and something metallic beneath. The floorboards groaned under his boots. Dust clung to the beams like cobwebs made of ash. And above him, that light, pale and trembling, hummed softly through the ceiling, a pulse that seemed to come from the walls themselves. He walked through the narrow corridor, tracing the old cables that snaked along the walls. Some were cut, others fused into the plaster. It was impossible, no visible source of electricity, and yet the bulb upstairs was still alive. He whispered to himself, probably residual charge, or a generator someone forgot to remove. His voice echoed strangely, like the house was repeating his words, syllable by syllable, slower each time. He climbed the stairs. Each step creaked like breath held too long. Halfway up, his flashlight flickered. He hit it. Nothing. But when he raised his head, the faint light from the top floor began to pulse. Once, twice, like it was answering him. They say every house has its own rhythm, its own heartbeat. In number 44, that heartbeat was the hum of the light. And when Ming reached the top, he found the bulb. A simple fluorescent tube hanging from two rusted wires, vibrating ever so slightly in the air. The switch on the wall was broken, yet the light remained on. He reached out, touching the wire with his tester. Zero current, no voltage. Impossible. He turned, scanning the room. It was empty except for a single chair facing the wall, and on that wall, a faint but visible under the flickering glow, someone had drawn a door. A door that didn't exist. A perfect rectangle, chalk white lines on gray plaster, and in its center, the outline of a handle. He felt something shift, the air tightening. The light blinked once, and just for a moment, the drawn handle seemed to turn. He froze. Then the hum returned. The door remained still. He exhaled slowly. That night, he stayed longer than he should have, tracing every wire, every socket. Nothing connected, nothing logical. Yet the light, his only company, refused to die. When he finally stepped outside, it was past midnight. Rain had begun to fall. Across the street, an old woman selling kanji under a tarp watched him with wary eyes. "Don't stay there too long," she said softly in Cantonese. Ming turned. "Why?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pointed to the light behind the window. "Every time someone touches it," she whispered, "someone inside wakes up." Then she looked at him, not in fear, but in pity, and turned away. The next morning, Ming returned with new equipment. He wanted to test the wiring again, trace the impossible circuit. He told himself it was science. He didn't believe in curses, but as he entered the house, he noticed something new. The chair that had faced the wall was now turned toward the door, and the bulb above him was humming louder. The chair had moved. Lao Ming stood in the doorway for a long time, rain dripping from his jacket, eyes fixed on that single wooden chair that now faced him. It looked ordinary, one leg slightly shorter than the others, a crack across the seat, but it wasn't where he left it. He could still remember how it had faced the wall, perfectly aligned with the drawn white door. Now it stared back, as though someone had been sitting there, waiting. He told himself it was wind, or maybe his memory. Old houses shifted overnight. Things slid, floorboards warped. He set down his tool bag, forcing a laugh that sounded thin inside the hollow room. Then he heard it, a faint clicking sound, like fingernails tapping glass. It came from above, somewhere near the bulb. He tilted his head back. The fluorescent tube buzzed faintly, its light a sickly blue-white that painted every shadow the color of bone. It wasn't flickering now. It was breathing, expanding and contracting in rhythm with the sound. Click, click, click. He climbed onto the chair, careful not to lose balance, and reached toward the bulb. It was warm, but the wires feeding it were still dead. He removed one connector and felt a jolt. Not electric, but cold, like plunging his hand into icy water. Something unseen brushed the edge of his palm. He flinched, pulling back, heart hammering. When he looked again, a fine gray powder drifted from the socket, like ash. For a long moment, he just stood there, breathing in the stillness. Then he whispered, almost as if to the house itself, "You're holding on to something, aren't you?" The light blinked once. Ming worked until evening, tracing wires, mapping circuits. He discovered that the old fuse box in the corridor had been modified. Someone had looped the neutral lines back into the wall, into a sealed cavity that shouldn't have been there. Behind the plaster, he could hear a faint hum, like distant static. He pressed his ear against it. Something moved. The sound wasn't mechanical. It was softer, uneven, like breath escaping from behind the wall. He stepped back quickly, tools clattering to the floor. As night fell, the street outside grew quieter. Rain seeped through the cracks of the window frame, dripping onto the dusty floorboards. Ming lit a small lamp beside his equipment, its yellow glow mingling with the pale light above, creating strange twin shadows that danced across the walls. He recorded notes into a small handheld device. No visible power source. Frequency of hum changes with temperature. Possible magnetic resonance from old transformer buried behind wall. But even as he spoke, he knew he was lying to himself. There was no transformer, no coil, no reason for a hum to sound like breathing. Then from somewhere downstairs came a faint sound of water dripping. 3 drops, a pause, then 3 again, perfectly measured as though timed. He walked down slowly, every step followed by a soft echo a second too late, as if someone was walking just behind him. The first floor looked unchanged. Empty hallway, peeling wallpaper, the faint outline of furniture long removed. But on the floor near the old kitchen door, he saw it, a small puddle spreading across the tiles, reflecting the ceiling light like a broken mirror. The drip came from a pipe overhead. No, not a pipe, a crack. And from that crack, the water ran red. He blinked, took a step closer. It wasn't blood, just rusty water, he told himself. Years of corrosion. He crouched, touched it. The liquid was cold, metallic, thick. When he lifted his fingers, a faint smear remained on his skin, darker than rust. Upstairs, the light flickered, 3 times in quick succession, then stopped. By the 3rd night, Ming no longer slept. He had moved some of his tools into the top room, convinced the answer lay somewhere behind the wall drawing. He placed microphones, measured EM fields, recorded the frequency of the light's pulse. It almost felt human, a slow rhythm, 52 beats per minute, a heart slowed by time. Sometimes when he looked at the chalk-drawn door for too long, he swore he saw faint marks near its edges, scratches, curved like fingernail trails. And under the humming of the light, another sound began to weave itself in, whispering, low, indistinct, like a conversation taking place in the next room, except there was no next room. At 2 a.m., he turned off his portable lamp and sat in the darkness. Only the pale blue light remained, bathing his face in the color of drowned things. He pressed record. Day 3. I think the frequency pattern responds to sound. When I speak, it slows. When I stop, it quickens, as if it listens. He paused, then softly, "Who are you?" For a moment, silence. Then, a faint tap from inside the wall. Once, twice, 3 times. He counted the intervals, breath shallow. It almost formed a rhythm, like Morse code except reversed, as if the pauses were words. He answered by tapping the floor with his wrench. The wall replied. On the 4th day, he visited the district office to retrieve the building's original blueprints. The clerk, a young woman, searched through the dusty archives, frowning. "There's a problem," she said finally. House 44 was never officially registered as a 3-story property. "What do you mean?" Ming asked. She turned the paper toward him. "The permit lists only 2 floors. The 3rd wasn't approved. There's no record of it existing at all." Ming stared at her, then back at the map. The room where the light hung, the one with the drawn door, wasn't there. Only blank space. When he returned that evening, the street outside felt different, quieter. The old kanji woman wasn't there anymore. Her stall had vanished, leaving only a dark, wet mark on the pavement, as if something heavy had stood there too long. Inside, the smell had changed. Not damp or dust now, but something faintly sweet, like burnt paper. The chalk drawing on the wall looked fresher, the lines sharper, as though someone had redrawn them. And the light was brighter. It filled the entire room. No longer just the bulb, it seemed to seep from the walls themselves, a steady, pulsing glow. He turned off his tester, no power reading, yet the air trembled with invisible energy. "You're not electricity," he murmured. "You're memory." The hum deepened, almost approvingly. That night he dreamed for the first time since arriving. He dreamed of corridors built inside walls, narrow, suffocating, endless. And in those corridors, hundreds of light tubes glowing without wires, stretching away into infinity. Beneath each one, a shape pressed against plaster, like a face half buried, eyes open, mouths silently forming the same word. Help. He woke at dawn, heart racing, drenched in sweat. The bulb above him still hummed, its color unchanged. But across the floor, dust had gathered into faint footprints, bare, small, leading toward the wall. By then, Ming had stopped trying to rationalize. He only wanted to understand. He set up his recorder once more, placed it on the floor, and sat on the chair, facing the drawn door. "I know you're here," he said quietly. "I've seen what's behind walls like these. If you need to leave, just show me how." For a long while, nothing happened, only the hum. Then the light blinked once, and a single line of chalk near the drawn handle began to crumble, dust falling like snow. Behind it, the faint outline of real wood appeared beneath the plaster, a door. He reached out, brushed away the dust, revealing the grain beneath. His fingers trembled. He shouldn't open it. He knew. But the bulb above grew brighter, almost urgent, as though begging him. He placed his hand on the cold surface. It felt alive, warm under the skin, pulsing gently. He pushed. A breath of air escaped, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and iron. He stepped back. Inside the gap was only darkness, and within that darkness, a soft rustle, like fabric moving underwater. He leaned closer and heard a voice no louder than a sigh. "Turn off the light." He spun around. No one, only the empty room, the empty chair, the light above whispering its endless hum. He looked back at the gap. It was gone, the wall smooth again. Outside, the city stirred awake. Trams clanged, vendors called out. Life returned to Sham Shui Po. But inside number 44, time had stopped. Ming gathered his tools, hands shaking. He needed air. When he stepped outside, sunlight hit his eyes like knives. He squinted, took a deep breath, and looked up. The bulb was still visible through the window, glowing softly even in daylight. And for the first time, he noticed something he hadn't before. A faint shadow on the curtain, shaped like a person sitting on a chair, still facing the wall. On the fifth morning, fog rolled over Sham Shui Po like slow-moving smoke. The streets disappeared beneath it. The sounds of vendors and trams softened into ghosts of their own. Inside number 44, Lao Ming stood at the window, staring out at the blurred world beyond, wondering why he hadn't walked away. Every instinct told him to stop, but the light above his head hummed softly, a patient, ceaseless rhythm. It had become something like a heartbeat, not his own, but the house's. He had stopped thinking of it as a bulb. Now, it was a presence, and like all presences, it wanted to be remembered. He set up new recording equipment, small microphones along the baseboards, sensors tracing vibration frequencies in the walls. If something lived behind the plaster, he wanted to catch it. He worked for hours in near silence, the faint buzz of the light filling every pause. When he finally played back the recordings, there was nothing at first, just the steady hum. But as he turned the gain higher, a whisper surfaced beneath it, too faint to be human speech, yet unmistakably intentional. He isolated the sound, looped it, slowed it down. Then he heard it, a woman's voice, not speaking but singing, or something close to it. The melody was fragmented, fragile, more breath than tone. The words were in Cantonese, old dialect, blurred by static. Keep the light on, keep the way open. He stopped the playback. In the silence that followed, the real light above him flickered, twice, almost shyly. He sat back, pulse racing. It was a song of remembrance, the kind sung at funerals before the last incense burned down. He knew it because his grandmother had whispered the same refrain once, long ago. As long as light remains, the spirit remembers the way home. He pressed record again. If you remember me, he said softly, show me. That night he dreamed again. He was standing in the same room, only it wasn't decayed anymore. The wallpaper was clean, the chair polished, the bulb new and steady above. From downstairs came laughter, faint, domestic, like the sound of people preparing dinner. A woman's voice called out, gentle but hurried, I told you to fix that switch, or the current will... Then the sound broke, replaced by the roar of electricity surging through wires. The light exploded, white and endless. When the vision faded, all that remained was the smell of ozone and a low sobbing echoing through the stairwell. He woke gasping, hand clutching his chest. The bulb above him swayed gently, humming louder now, as though it too had been crying. By dawn, he was pacing the room trying to understand. Accidents, deaths, unrecorded structures. There had to be a file, a report, something. He searched online archives, scanned microfilm at the local library, called retired inspectors. Finally, he found a single article from 1974. Fatal electrocution in Pei-Ho Street building. Female owner dies in accident while repairing illegal electric circuit. No further details, no photograph, just one line at the bottom. House declared unsafe. Property seized by government. He read the paragraph again, then looked at the address. Number 44. The article mentioned a husband who had been away at sea. No mention of children, no burial record, nothing. The more he searched, the more gaps appeared. As if the woman's life had been carefully erased, her name swallowed by silence. When he returned to the house that evening, the fog had thickened again. The streets looked the same, but quieter. He couldn't find the noodle shop on the corner anymore. It was as if parts of the neighborhood were fading too, piece by piece in sympathy with number 44. Inside, the air was warmer, humid, almost like breath on glass. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning beneath his weight. At the landing, he paused. There was something new on the wall. Faint outlines drawn in dust, as if fingertips had traced shapes during the night. They weren't words. They were circuits. Thin lines branching, looping, connecting, like veins of a body. He followed them with a flashlight, realizing they formed a pattern leading toward the ceiling, converging directly at the light. And in the center of that web, faintly visible, was a handprint. Small, delicate, pressed deep into the plaster, as if someone had reached out from within. He reached up, his hand trembling, and placed his palm over it. The light blinked, and for one instant, warmth spread through his arm. Not the cold of before, but something almost human. He felt emotion in it, sadness, regret, longing. Then it was gone. Later that night, he played the recordings again. This time, more voices emerged, not just the woman, multiple layers. Laughter, footsteps, snippets of daily life. A child humming, dishes clinking, the faint echo of radio static announcing the weather. All sounds from another time. The house was remembering, and buried beneath them, something else. A man shouting, a crack of electricity, and a scream abruptly cut short. He froze the playback. The waveform pulsed erratically, a burst of noise followed by silence. Then faintly, between frequencies, came a single whisper, almost inaudible. "They sealed me inside." His hand slipped. The recording stopped. He stared at the player. The screen was blank, though the device was still on, and from somewhere behind the wall came a single, heavy thud, like a fist. He turned off the recorder, heart pounding, and stepped back toward the stairs. But the door wouldn't open. The handle felt stuck, as if the air had thickened into glue. He pulled again, harder, and suddenly the light flared white, filling the room with blinding brilliance. He covered his eyes, and in that white light, he saw it. A flash of another world layered atop his own. A woman standing by the same wall, hands covered in soot, shouting for help. Her clothes burned, her face pale with terror. Sparks leapt from the wires, catching the wallpaper behind her. Smoke, fire, a collapse of plaster. Then nothing. The image vanished as quickly as it came. He stumbled backward, gasping, blinking away tears. The room was dark now, the light finally gone. Only the faint smell of burnt insulation lingered. For the first time, the bulb was dead. He should have felt relief, but what he felt instead was silence. The house no longer breathed. No hum, no whisper, no pulse. It was as if he had unplugged a body from its own heart. He packed his things, shaking, ready to leave for good. But as he reached the front door, the switch behind him clicked. Once, the light came back on. This time it didn't flicker. It burned steady and golden, the way sunlight looks through water. He turned slowly. The wall where the chalk door had been drawn was now clean, completely clean, as if repainted. No lines, no scratches, no sign of the handprint. Only the faint silhouette of a woman, barely visible in the glow, standing exactly where the chair had been. Her outline shimmered, blurred by light. No features, no sound, just presence. Ming stood frozen, his breath shallow. She didn't move, didn't approach, but he felt her gaze, the kind that weighs, that sees through the surface of things. He whispered, "Is it you? The one from the report?" The silhouette shifted slightly, her head tilting. Then very softly, almost imperceptibly, she raised her hand and pointed to the floor beneath the bulb. Ming hesitated, then knelt. He tapped the wooden boards. Hollow, he pried one open with a screwdriver. Dust rose. Beneath it lay a small piece of cloth, a burnt apron, and a cracked porcelain cup, still half filled with hardened wax. A candle. He stared at it. Someone had tried to finish a ritual before dying. He looked back up, but the woman was gone. The light still glowed, steady as ever. That night he didn't sleep. He sat in the chair, facing the wall where she had stood, the candle placed on the floor beside him. He lit it with his lighter. The small flame flickered against the blue light, creating strange patterns across his face. For the first time he felt calm. "You died here," he whispered, "and they sealed you inside, didn't they? You kept the light alive so someone would find you." A faint gust moved through the room. No open windows, yet the candle flame bent slightly, as if nodding. He closed his eyes. "Tell me what you need." No voice replied, but the bulb above dimmed slowly, pulsing once every few seconds. He understood. It was guiding him towards something unfinished, a ritual broken, a passage closed too soon. He placed the candle under the light, between shadow and glow. The air thickened, vibrating like a low note of music. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he heard the faint ringing of a temple bell. And beneath that, the woman's song again, clearer now. Keep the light on until I find the way home. Then everything went still. At sunrise, Ming stepped out of the house. The fog was gone. Birds cried faintly over the rooftops. When he looked back at number 44, he noticed the bulb through the upper window flickering gently, as if waving goodbye. He told himself he was done, that the haunting was over. But as he walked down Pei Ho Street, his phone vibrated, a notification from his recording device. New audio file detected, 04:44 a.m. He hadn't recorded anything. Yet the file was there. He played it. A woman's voice, calm, soft, no longer distorted. Thank you for remembering me. And then faintly at the end, the sound of a switch turning off. The next morning, fog rolled down from the harbor like an exhausted ghost. Sham Shui Po was barely awake. Street vendors setting up their stalls, old women burning incense outside small shrines, the city breathing in slow, gray sighs. Ngoin haso 44 van jungjo, lang hu mot vet tuong kep mieng, nhung kong bao giolan. The engineer returned with heavier tools and a reluctant determination. The company had sent him because no one else would go. The others had heard the rumors. The building was said to belong to a family that vanished without a trace. Only a trail of electricity bills still being paid by no one. When he entered, the smell of damp wood and burnt metal filled his lungs. The light from the single bulb trembled faintly, as though aware of his presence. He began tracing the lines of the circuit again, every wire brittle, rusted, or eaten by time. But something was wrong. The system made no sense. Live wires connected to walls that should have been dead. Power feeding into corners where no switch existed. It was like the house had rewired itself. He followed one cable that disappeared into a narrow slit in the plaster. The slit was too straight, too deliberate. When he pulled gently, the wall gave a low groan. Beneath the thin surface, something shifted, a sound like breathing. He froze. The air thickened. He touched the wall again. Warm. Not the warmth of electricity, the warmth of skin. He stumbled backward, but the light flickered once, then steadied. He thought he saw a shadow on the wall, a woman's outline, faint, as if burned into it. Her head tilted, her hair falling in strands of static. He blinked and the shape was gone. He turned off the switch. The bulb didn't die. He turned it again. Nothing changed. The light refused to go out. He stared at the ceiling, at the bulb humming softly like a whisper from another room. He could almost make out words, murmurs in Cantonese, perhaps prayers, perhaps curses. His phone vibrated suddenly, startling him. The screen was blank white. No signal, no battery icon, just a faint glow that pulsed with the same rhythm as the light bulb. He dropped it. Outside, a tram bell rang, distant and hollow. It reminded him of a funeral procession. He approached the wall again, this time with a small chisel. A part of him knew he shouldn't, but the logic of an engineer told him maybe there was a short circuit, maybe a trapped current. Something explainable. He dug. The plaster cracked open like old bone. Beneath it, he found a layer of charred wood, and beneath that, something pale, smooth. It was not a wire. It was a hand. A woman's hand, fingers curled, skin fused with the cement. Nails painted a color long dead. He stumbled backward, choking on dust in disbelief. The hand was real, embedded in the wall. He could hear the bulb above him begin to hiss, the light pulsing brighter, faster, almost frantic. And then he heard the whisper again, this time clearer. "Do not turn it off." He spun around. No one, just the wall. He grabbed his tools, trembling. The rational part of his mind tried to explain it away. Maybe hallucination, exhaustion, trapped voices through the wiring. But when he looked at the floor, he noticed something he hadn't before. Faint black footprints, wet, leading away from the wall. He followed them through the hallway, into a room with a single mirror leaning against the wall. The reflection in it wasn't his. It was her. The woman he had glimpsed earlier, now standing in the reflection with her head tilted, lips moving slowly. He couldn't hear her words, but her expression was neither angry nor kind, just pleading. He looked closer. The mirror was shaking slightly, like it was breathing. Then he understood what she was mouthing. "It was me." The words sank into him like frost. She lifted her hand in the reflection, pointing toward the bulb. He turned, and in the reflection's corner, he saw more of them. Faces pressed against the walls, countless, silent, as if the entire house was built of them. He ran, down the hallway through the main door, but the door wouldn't open. The knob was ice cold. The sound of static filled his ears, 1,000 voices whispering at once, too many to separate. He pressed his forehead against the wood, breath shallow. "I'm sorry," he whispered, not knowing why. And the light behind him flickered once more. When he turned, the house was quiet again. The walls smooth, no hand, no faces, only the bulb, shining steady. He collapsed to his knees. The air was heavy with something ancient, like incense long burnt away, but still lingering. He stayed there for a long time, staring at the unblinking light, until dawn bled through the cracked windows. When he finally left, he didn't tell anyone what he'd found. He only said the wiring was done, the system was fine. But every night since, in his small apartment across the district, he swore he could still see it, through his window far away. The light at number 44, still on, always on, even during a blackout that swept through Sham Shui Po that summer. They say a house remembers, even when its walls are repainted, its windows replaced, its address forgotten. Something inside continues to hum, a pulse that never fades. Months passed since the engineer last stepped foot in number 44. He tried to return to his ordinary routines, checking voltage lines, repairing small household systems, pretending that all wires led only to light, not to the dead. But the nights no longer felt ordinary. Each time he switched on a light in his apartment, the faintest flicker would follow, a pulse like a heartbeat behind the glass. Once he even saw her reflection on the surface of a lamp, so brief he might have blamed it on exhaustion. Except he hadn't been tired, he had been watched. One night a call came from his supervisor, another blackout in Sham Shui Po, half the district in darkness, except one single building. Number 44. The engineer didn't want to go. Every instinct told him to stay away. But something heavier than fear began pulling him back, a sense of unfinished duty, or perhaps guilt. He packed his tools and went. The city was half asleep under candlelight. The air hung thick with rain and the smell of wet concrete. When he reached the end of the street, he saw it. Through the mist, the faint white glow in the window of the abandoned house. The light was still alive. He pushed open the door, and the sound it made was not of hinges, but of something exhaling. Inside, the house was the same. The bulb hummed, a steady rhythm, like breathing. The air felt warmer, alive. He called out once, "Is anyone here?" No answer, only the faint hum of electricity. He looked around. And on the floor, the footprints were back, black, damp, leading toward the same wall, the one where he had found the hand. He dropped to his knees and began peeling at the plaster again, desperate, trembling, whispering apologies he didn't understand. As he tore through the layers, the bulb overhead began to stutter. The rhythm of the flicker aligned with his heartbeat, on, off, until his chest and the light were one. Beneath the final layer, he found a small pocket of air, sealed long ago, and inside, a rosary bead, a photograph burned at the edges, and a name written on the back in faded ink. He read it out loud. The moment the name left his lips, the bulb burst. Darkness swallowed the room, and then she spoke, right behind him. "You shouldn't have said it." He turned, but there was no one. Only the faint phosphorescence of the broken filament on the floor, still glowing without power. The whisper continued, now all around him, like the walls themselves were speaking. "It wasn't the house that took me, it was the light." Images flooded his mind, flashbacks of the past, memories not his own. A woman hiding during the riots decades ago, soldiers kicking in doors, screams, fire. She had locked herself in this room, clung to the switch, praying that if she kept the light on, she would be safe. But the power had failed. The darkness came first, then the fire. And when rescuers came days later, they found her body fused to the wall, half burned, half buried by falling beams. The neighbors, terrified of her spirit, sealed the wall again and connected the bulb directly to the main line, so that it would never go dark, so that she would never have to relive her final fear. An eternal offering, a light that must never be turned off. But the engineer had done it. He had cut the power, he had broken the pact. The realization sank into him like ice. He looked up and saw faint shadows forming on the walls. Faces, dozens of them, all gazing at him, not with hatred, but with pity. He whispered, voice cracking, "I'll fix it, I promise." He stumbled toward the circuit board, hands shaking, trying to restore the line. Sparks flew as he forced the wire back into place. The house trembled as if gasping for air. And then, light. The bulb flared once, blinding, a white so pure it erased everything. When his eyes adjusted, the walls were empty again. The hum was calm, the air no longer heavy. He exhaled, trembling. He gathered his tools and left. Outside, dawn was rising over Sham Shui Po. Vendors were opening stalls, children running through puddles. The world felt normal again. He didn't notice the faint glow reflected in the puddle near his feet, the reflection of a light shining behind him, always steady, never dying. Weeks later, the building was sold to a developer. They tore down number 44 to make space for a new apartment block. But when construction began, something strange happened. The workers said they could hear the sound of electricity humming under the ground, like a current still running through invisible wires. They checked every circuit. Nothing. Still, the hum continued. And on the first night after the new building opened, a tenant complained to the landlord. There was a flickering in her room, she said, a faint white light that would turn itself on whenever the power went out. When she looked closer, she realized there was no bulb in the socket, only a glow trapped inside the wall. They say in Sham Shui Po, some lights don't need electricity. They burn on memory. They live on guilt. And if you ever find yourself walking down that narrow street and you see a single white glow from a building that should be dark, do not stop. Do not look inside. Because every time someone looks, every time someone notices, the house remembers, and the light flickers once more.